want to call your attention to the first slide, and it refers to the Amadou Diallo shooting, and this incident, it happened in 1999, was the origin of the term contagious shooting, as far as I know. What happened was 4 plainclothes police officers in an unmarked Ford Taurus were looking for a suspect, African American, and they saw someone walking. They yelled to him. He walked away. They yelled more. He walked faster to the stoop of his building where he lives. And then they told him to put his hands up. He was an immigrant. English was not his second, third, or even fourth language. The family was originally from New Guinea but lived in Africa. And he may have just misunderstood, but he reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet. At that point, the officers were out of the vehicle, coming up the steps, and at some point someone stumbled and fell back. Someone shot, and the other 3 officers interpreted that someone had been shot and was fallen. And 41 shots later, they realized that Diallo was not armed at all. He had his wallet in his hand. Created a tremendous furor, claims of racism, police brutality. And this topic was discussed at length in the book, the title Blink, Malcolm Gladwell's book, when he talked about making split-second decisions with very little information. And that's what happened with those officers in that situation. They were ultimately found not guilty of murder, but they had to go through murder trials. They were ultimately sued. It was a horrible situation for them. And in the next slide, well, this first slide has a cartoon. He's black because that's how he was born. He's suspicious because he's black. He's pursued because he's suspicious. He's defensive because he's pursued. He's shot because he's defensive. He's dead because he's black. And that was the interpretation of the general public. And that's why it created such a furor. This next slide shows the pictures of the officers during the course of the trial. Obviously a horrible experience for them. And the Time magazine cover with a picture of Diallo, who is a light-skinned black man originally from New Guinea. Now imagine, of course, someone that you're evaluating in such a stressful situation, and yet they are even more impaired. Let me explain. In a situation of stress, maybe the lighting's not so good, maybe it's the end of the shift and you're tired, already a difficult situation. And then if you add to that effects of drugs, alcohol, or prescription medications that either alter your perceptions, distort judgment, affect reaction time, or cause overreaction, all of those problems that can be caused and are caused by medications become a life and death matter at that point. And that's the reason for this class today. Our next slide shows the most popular prescription drugs. And really, it actually surprised me. I knew that Vicodin, or hydrocodone, was the most popular addictive prescription drug, but I didn't realize it's actually the most popular, most prescribed drug in the United States, more than anything else. 3 billion pills per year. And the reason it's used so much is it's a strong painkiller, but it is listed by the DEA as a medication that can have refills. So it's a lot more convenient for the doctor. And in some cases, I've seen doctors give a large prescription with 12 refills, and a year later, a patient becomes quite addicted to these. And of course, some patients will have multiple doctors and multiple prescriptions. So it's a tremendous problem, and it's something I deal with every day. It's an opiate medication. It is effective for pain, and it leads to addiction, tolerance, and opiate dependence. Often it's a stepping stone to stronger opiate medications. Percodan, as an example, generic name oxycodone, as opposed to hydrocodone, which is Vicodin. And then OxyContin is the slow-release form of oxycodone, often in very high doses. And to defeat the slow-release properties of OxyContin, people addicted to these medications have developed an incredibly complicated strategy. They chew it. By chewing it, it releases the medication all at once, defeats this idea that it's slow release. A lot of doctors haven't caught on to that because it is so complicated, the idea that someone would actually chew something. And so they continue to prescribe it thinking, well, this is safe because it's slow release over a period of 12 hours. And often, primary care doctors don't realize the addictive potential of these medications. Other medications that you see advertised on television all the time are sleeping pills. And one way to figure out if a drug is a sleeping pill is if it has Z's in it. And that goes back to Thorazine with a Z, or diazepam, which is Valium, has a Z, alprazolam, Xanax with a Z. And then the new ones are Zolpidem, Zolpiclone, etc. And they're advertised on TV constantly. The ads really make it sound like they're not really very addictive. And yet I admit patients to the hospital all the time with serious addiction to Ambien, Lunesta, Sonata. And so these are dangerous medications. Also, the addictive potential is grossly underestimated by primary care physicians. And you will see people who've been on it for years, who are on high doses. And these are the cases you hear about driving the wrong way on the freeway, getting up in the middle of the night and eating a loaf of bread, or drinking large amounts of alcohol during a blackout in their sleep. It's basically sleepwalking. And when it involves sleep driving, of course, it's a frightening situation. Very commonly prescribed. The other medications often prescribed by primary care physicians include antidepressants, usually the SSRI or serotonin type. Because they're easy to prescribe, they have few side effects. Doctors often underestimate the problems that can happen with those. Blood pressure medications, obviously very common. And I'm going to look at the next slide. Xanax, alprazolam, is number 12 on the all-time most popular prescription list, which is somewhat surprising because Xanax is very addictive. Other medications like Valium or Librium or Klonopin are actually much less addictive because they're longer acting. The difference is Xanax compared to Valium is like heroin compared to OxyContin. One is very fast acting, very addictive. The other is slower acting and less addictive. And I will talk about why drugs are addictive, why you build up a tolerance and need more and more of it later on in this talk. But suffice it to say, the faster acting a drug is, the faster it clears out of your system and the faster you go into withdrawal. And therefore you need more of the medication to have any kind of effect, or even to avoid being sick from the lack of the medication. Our next slide shows statin medications. Everyone knows about cholesterol. Statins are very commonly prescribed, usually don't cause problems, but in some people actually cause confusion and memory loss, even disorientation. And you may have someone in a fitness for duty evaluation who sometimes they're confused and disoriented, sometimes they're perfectly clear, and everyone on earth knows without a shadow of a doubt that they must be a drug addict. And in reality, they're taking non-addictive medication exactly as prescribed. And so this is something, you know, it's a good reason to get the list of all prescription medications. People notoriously don't know the names of their medications. So ask them to get that list. Probably best ask their wife to put the list together, or their spouse or their mom before the evaluation. And obviously, if somebody's forgetful and confused, they're the last person on earth you want to rely on for this information. Next slide just shows diabetes medication. Metformin is the number 6 on the all-time most popular list. The reason that's important is, you know, what do diabetes medications do? They lower your blood sugar. That's what they're supposed to do. If they lower your blood sugar too much, it causes hypoglycemia, which can cause confusion, shaking, tremor, and even disorientation or even loss of consciousness if it's severely low blood sugar. And so this is important. The other side of that coin is if people don't take their medication. People do not like to take these medications because they don't like that feeling of hypoglycemia, and so they conveniently skip them. But if their blood sugar becomes too high, that also can cause confusion, sluggishness, low energy. Number 14 on our all-time popular list is metoprolol, and it's for high blood pressure. It's an effective medication. It's commonly prescribed, it's cheap, generic, but in some people it causes significant confusion